The village of Chirakal trusted the alarms to save them, but when the storm came, the alarm stayed silent. Dave, who had felt the warning in his bones, knew the danger was real, and time was slipping away. Few weeks before the storm, he walked away from the job and the pressure. He thought he'd left the noise behind, but silence has its own way of catching up. He told himself he was fine. Maybe I needed a break. Maybe it's time to explore. But the silence grew louder each day. He sat across from his sister at the dinner table one evening, barely touching his food. The words slipped out before he could stop them. You ever feel like the world just moved on without you? She didn't look up right away, just stirred her rice for a moment. Then quietly she said, "Everyone feels that at some point, but you were good at what you did, Dev. That doesn't just vanish." He didn't respond, but something in him tightened and held. Days blurred into each other. No purpose, no anchor, just a whirlwind of questions and that nagging fear. That evening at a small tea shop, a fisherman said something that troubled him. They say a storm's coming, but the app says it'll pass. Dave didn't say much, just sipped his tea. But later that night he couldn't sleep. There was a tension in the air. The sea didn't sound right. The wind carried a weight he remembered from the old days, before machines took over. He used to spot storms before the models did. That ability was still with him. But no one pays attention to former employees, especially those who have been replaced by technology. He didn't raise his voice or panic. He simply appeared, and those who remembered him listened. It struck harder than the forecasts had predicted, but fewer people were taken by surprise, thanks to one man, a man whom the system claimed was no longer needed. After the storm, life slowly returns to normal. There's damage, yes, but people begin to rebuild. Sometimes when you're no longer in the spotlight, it feels like you don't matter, like you've been replaced by a system or a machine. But the truth is, what really matters is what you can still do. Even if no one's watching, showing up when it counts still makes a difference. He saw it in their eyes, gratitude, not because he rescued them, but because he cared enough to show up. For a while, he believed he'd been replaced, forgotten, like he no longer mattered. But maybe he just needed to remember who he was. If we relate this story to our own lives, it reminds us of something we often forget. In a world that moves fast, it's easy to feel like we don't matter anymore, like we've been left behind. But this story shows us that purpose isn't always tied to a title, a paycheck, or the latest technology. Sometimes it's found in the quiet moments, when you lend a hand, listen, or simply show up for someone. You don't need to have a job to have value. You don't need to fix everything to make a difference. All it takes is the willingness to care, to step up in small ways, even if no one's watching. If you've ever felt left behind, maybe it's not the end. Maybe it's just the moment before you matter most. Have you ever felt replaceable? What did you do next? Share your story in the comments. We'd love to hear it. And if this story stayed with you, don't forget to subscribe to the Imaginarium, Stories That Change You.